Buenas tardes, good evening and buonasera. Soy Alessandro Colombo de Florencia, Italia, y estoy encantado de estar con vosotros y de presentaros a la conferencia que vamos a tener esta noche. Soy el director de Accademia Italiana. Accademia Italiana es una universidad de diseño, de artes visuales y de moda con sede en Florencia y en Roma. Vale, Florencia y Roma, claro, dos ciudades con muchísima historia, pero con mucha contemporaneidad en los mundos de arquitectura y de diseño. Y esto lo vamos a descubrir esta noche con nuestro profesor. Estamos aquí para hablar de academia, para hablar de diseño con vosotros y para crear un puente entre Italia y México, entre Italia y América y intentar explicar cuáles son las cosas buenas de venir a estudiar en ciudades como Florencia y como Roma, que tienen, claro, épocas y representan épocas muy importantes de la historia, el Renacimiento en Florencia y la época romana en Roma, claro, pero que tienen un presente muy interesante y nuestras escuelas trabajan comparando, poniendo en contacto la tradición y llevándola y lanzándola en el futuro. Pues aquí estamos, ahora vamos a tener una conferencia más o menos de unos 50 minutos con Gianluca, que ahora os voy a presentar, y después, al final, muy importante, podéis hacer preguntas sobre la conferencia, sobre los temas de la conferencia, sobre la escuela, sobre Italia y sobre el diseño, en el mundo del diseño y de las artes visuales en general. Estamos muy felices de estar aquí con vosotros. La conferencia de Gianluca va a ser en inglés y en inglés es su bio que ahora os voy a presentar. Así que Gianluca Buoncore graduated in architecture at University of Florence, where he got a PhD in architecture, design, knowledge, and safeguarding of cultural heritage, specializing in architectural and urban design. He has held both scholarship and research fellowship position at the same university. He teaches design culture at Accademia Italiana, focusing on design process relation with the context of the quality of the space. Is member of Natural Light and Sacred Space Research Unit at viva, which is the Department of Architecture, University of Florence, and member of the Research Center on the Mediterranean Architecture at University of Our Lady of Good Counsel in Tirana. Since 2020, he has been member of the editorial board for the international journal In Bo, Research and Project for Landscape, Town and Architecture at the University of Bologna. He has been involved in teaching assistant at DIDA since 2012, and since 2023, he has been lecturing at international institutes in Florence, like Accademia Italiana. His research focuses on the 20th century's architecture with a particular emphasis on Italian masters and sacred architecture. He organizes and participates in conferences, exhibition, workshop, scientific lecture, and architectural design competition. Since 2023, he has been president of AIGU, Italian Youth Association for UNESCO. So, Gianluca, how are you?
Hello, Alessandro. Hello, everyone. I'm very fine, thank you. I'm
Yeah,
very happy and enjoying to be here with you today.
good. So thanks for being here. Thanks to all the guests for following this time with us. Thank you very much to Encuentro Creativo to organize this session, which is very, very useful. So I'm going to disappear, and Gianluca is going to take the lead, and we'll see you in 50 minutes to take some questions from you. Okay, Gianluca, the mic is yours.
Okay. So, first of all, I'm Gianluca. I'm very happy to be here with you. As Alessandro said, I teach design culture at Accademia Italiana, and I'm very happy of teaching these fields because it's a very interesting aspect. It's not only focus on design, strictly talking, but it's a very complex way of thinking about the design process. So even the lecture I've prepared for you today is not strictly dedicated to design, but is dedicated in according to me, of the most important aspect in the design process. I mean the context. A lot of time students think the design process starts on a blank paper, but it's not. It's not this way. The design process starts looking around you, looking around the place where you live, the place where you have to work. So you can find a lot of inspiration, a lot of culture, a lot of history that could be part of your work. So into this lecture, I try to have a virtual journey with you into different places from Italy, Tuscany especially, where I work and live for several years, and different parts of Europe. So try to understand how culture, the cultures of the places and the context of the place could be part of our design. I will talk about especially architecture and cities, that is my specialization, of course, but this kind of lectures, this kind of reading the context could be extended in different aspects of design process, starting with the interior design, product design, photography, art, etc., etc. And I will show you some painters, I will show you some art, sculpture, and places and architecture. So it will be a very long journey. First of all, I ask myself, and especially I ask my student, what is a character? So I always explain that if I wanna know someone of you, I wanna know a person, a boy, a girl, probably if I take his or her ED, I can have some information. So I could know where he was born, where, how he's tall, the color of the hair, of the eyes. But probably it's just some information, but I don't know anything about the character of the person. So probably I need to spend time to understand if he's a shy, he's a enthusiast person, etc., etc. So for the places, for the architecture, for the cities, for everything is almost the same. So we need to open our eyes to spend time observing and try to analyze and understanding how a space, a piece of furniture, an architecture, an interior could work. So what is the character? Probably the character would be the soul of something. So is my personality, and even the architecture, the cities, the designs has personalities. So this is very important to understand how these work, and to be able to bring in our design process, what we can learn from what is around us. So I'd like to start with the Florence, because it's where we work, where Accademia is one of the two cities where Accademia is located, and where you should probably could come and study with us. So the first image I want to show you is amazing painting by Ottone Rosai. Ottone Rosai was a painter from Florence of the 20th century, so it's not so old. Probably you can understand even from the language of this picture. Ottone Rosai worked a lot in representing Florence and the countryside of the Tuscany. And what is interesting is to see how Rosai tried to explain the main characteristic of the street of Florence or the countryside. In this painting, for example, we can understand something about the characteristic of Florence. Probably this was a piece not of the city center, of course, but almost in the hills around the city center. But if you have the possibility to visit Florence and have a walk into the small street around the city center, probably you will find a place very similar to this painting. And Rosai what explain to us through his eyes. So we can see these high walls made of this brown color, very material brown color that surround all the street and represent a very narrow street where we can understand that something happened behind these walls. For example, we can see the trees, we can see with this almost blind facade of the house with a small, very small and shadow window. So immediately Rosai show us how this part of the city is not a part very alive, is not a part with a lot of decoration, sculpture. So it's a very silent place that show us a very peaceful situation. In another, and probably this is my opinion, there's a very Tuscan representation in Rosai painting. Why? Because a lot of centuries, years ago, the Etruscan people usually used to realize this carved street into the stone. And if we compare these two images, we can understand how in the interior culture of Tuscany people, Rosai can read something that centuries later is still valid in terms of aspect, in terms of characteristic. But at the same time, in another painting from Rosai, we can read something very similar from the first painting, but it's a little bit different. We are not into these two street narrow walls, but we are in a more open system. We can still see our blind wall on the left, but at the same time we can see two important volumes. First of all, we can understand that the volume in the center is a house. We can recognize thanks to the red roof, very clear in terms of representation. But at the same time, if you look well this house, we can't see the windows. Why? Not because there's not any windows in the real life, but because the windows are not so important to show us the characteristics of this house, made of a simple block, a simple volume that show us the pure geometry of the composition. At the same way, even this volume on the right, this brown volume, show us a very simple geometric system, and altogether create a system, an environmental system where the landscape, the horizon is close behind these volumes, where we can understand that something again happened behind of this thanks to the vertical system of the tree. And moving is another painting from Ottone Rosai. We are in the city center of Florence, but we are not in the most important area of the city center of Florence, for example, to the cathedral of Piazza della Signoria, but we are in the smallest area, is not the not rich area. And in this case, we can understand again how we can find some elements, some aspect we already seen in the paintings of the countryside. So we are this very silent facade made of brown, yellow walls, not very decorated, but very simple, carved only from this deep shadow of the small windows. So we can understand how the relation between the wall and the empty space of the doors or the windows are more important for the plain wall. So Rosai show us a very important aspect, a characteristic, as the soul of the city and the countryside of Florence. And in another painting, again from Rosai, we can understand very well how this yellow, brown, red system made of plaster, especially, is a very simple, organized in simple volume, simple facade, only with this simple geometric shape of the windows that create like a pattern into the plane surface. But there's another interesting aspect that another interesting author, in this case poetry, Rilke, is a German poetry that used to live for a while in Florence, traveling in Italy just to discover the Renaissance, discover the history, the ancient culture, etc. And Rilke, into his book, The Florentine Diary, describe very well the characteristic of Florence, focusing especially into the main building, the main palaces of Florence. And into this, his diary, Rilke talks about this dual aspect of the Florentine palaces. Especially, he said that from outside, the Palace of Florence, the typology of the Palace of Florence looked like a fortress. It's not like a rich palace, but it looked like a fortress, very strong, very silent, a pure, strong geometry, that it seems just like a fortress, a castle just to protect something or someone. Even in this case, for example, Palazzo Medici Riccardi is in the city center of Florence. But if you analyze the other important palaces of Florence, just like Palazzo Strozzi, Palazzo Rucellai, Palazzo Pitti itself, that's in front of our Accademia Italiana, you could find very similar characteristic. Outside, this a very strong, solid facade made of brown stone. But at the same time, Rilke says that inside it's look like total opposite. So we can see how inside the palace, the typology of palace in Florence becomes a very rich word. So outside it's like just a box that protect something rich and important inside. So even in this case, we are in Piazza della Signoria, probably the most famous and important building and palace in Florence. Now it's a museum. We have part of the city council, the municipality of Florence. Outside, again, it looks like a fortress, just like a castle. It's a defensive aspect, it's not a rich aspect. Again, we can see this brown stone with this silent facade organized just in this sequence of small windows. And again, we can see this pure, strong geometry that face the urban space. But what happened inside? Again, we can find this high contrast with this richness in the courtyard, for example, or even in the rooms, in the spaces inside of the building. So again, just like Rilke analyzed the aspect, the soul of the palaces of Florence, that we can see how this is totally true, and it works very well in this kind of analysis. So what happened into the modern, the contemporary design of the city center? This is the apse of Santa Maria Novella Church. It's a Gothic church, but again, if we want to compare with the most famous French Gothic architecture, we can see there's nothing in common except the pointed arch, for example. But what is interesting is to see how in front of this Gothic church realized in 13th century, in almost 100 years ago or less, some architects were participated in international competition to design the new train station. So it was a very hard job. Why? Because they were in one of the most famous historical city, and they're not in the outside area of the city center, but it was in the heart of the city center, a few meters from the Gothic church and 200 meters from the cathedral. So what the architect understood from the persistent building and brought into their project. So analyzing the apse, they understood that this apse was made of two important material that represent two important aspects of the character of the soul of this building. So the brownstone, the solid brownstone, and the glass parts of the windows. So using these two elements, they design the new train station, organizing in a horizontal system that try to respect the verticality of the Gothic church, but using the same material, so, with a blind, silent facade, and using just one big fall of glass that face the glass of the Gothic church. So try to find a relation, a talk, even using contemporary language, contemporary materials, contemporary design. And in this case, in this original drawing, we can understood very well how this solid volume, this pure volume, very close to the historical buildings from Florence, is just cut from this huge fall of glass that bring inside a lot of natural light. And facing these two pictures, we can understood very well how the modern, the contemporary design could learn from the context, and the context could be an absolutely important part of the design inspiration, even changing language, changing materials, change structure, change everything using a modern language. So when we talk about context and inspiration from the context, it never means to copy and replicate the past, but it means understanding how the context could express itself and how we can understood from the context. So another painting from Rosai show us the skyline of Florence. So it's not a real skyline, of course, but it's just a representation of the most important aspect of the skyline of Florence. And what we can see from this painting, we can understand that we have two levels of volumes, two levels of buildings. We have the pattern of the city made of small elements, small volumes, especially houses made of white plaster and red roof with tiles. We have the gray building that represents some important building, just like the monument. We can understand here the Church of Santa Croce, we can see Palazzo della Signoria, but differently from the monument, we can see another important building, is the Florence Cathedral, Santa Maria del Fiore. And we can recognize, thanks to the white surface that represent the white marble, and especially with this huge red dome that face not only the city, but face the countryside and the skyline of the hills that surround the city of Florence. So with the very few elements, Rosai was able to show us the most important character of the Florence skyline. But Rosai wasn't the only one that tried to express the idea of Florence. In this amazing sketch realized by the architect Le Corbusier, the modern architect Le Corbusier, for example, in the sketch on the right, we can understand how he tried to synthesize the idea of the dome of the Cathedral of Florence. But again, if you look what happened around the dome, we can understand that we have again the skyline of the hills. And this is very interesting because during the Renaissance, Giorgio Vasari, the famous architect Giorgio Vasari, talked about the cathedral, about the project of Brunelleschi, used to say that the dome is a space, is a volume that not face the city, but face the landscape, face the hills. And it's so big in terms of dimension, in terms of proportion, very different from the rest of the city, that the most important connection is not with the city itself, but with the hills around the city center. So in this case, we can understood how in modern times, so in the 20th century, painter and architects was able to understand something that was created centuries before. And even in this sketch, this amazing sketch by the American architect Louis Kahn, we can understood how Kahn draw with few lines again the small pattern of the city in this amazing perspective. And at the end of this perspective, the Dome of Florence arrives just like an amazing different between the pattern and the dome itself in the dimension and in the relation they can create each other. But other painting from Louis Kahn, for example, he visited San Gimignano, another medieval city here in Tuscany. And if you look the sketch, the painting on the left and the picture from on the right, you could understand how Louis Kahn was able to catch the information of the city center, characterized by these amazing medieval towers, but at the same time can show us the materiality of the bricks, the red and yellow colors, even the plain surface with no windows, but even the composition made of volumes. And this kind of analysis realized by Louis Kahn brought him to realize a new scientific center in the US that show us this composition made of towers. So again, is the past that create inspiration from for the new design. But changing city, so when Kahn moved to Venezia, we can understand how is able to understand the strong decoration, the vitality, the amazing experience of the gold we can see in this rounded part of the church was brought into this sketch that want to represent not only the volume, because it's not a survey, it's just an interpretation of the character of the soul of the city itself. And if we wanna compare these two sketches, we can see, even if it was realized by the same author, they are totally different. Why? Because the cities are different. So he wants to represent this diversity, but at the same time try to express to other one the main part of the soul of the two different cities. So in this case, in the first example, we can see this brown-yellow system, these simple geometric volumes. On the other hand, instead, we can see these red, yellow colors, very bright, very alive, vibrant system, and this system a little bit chaotic, that show us the richness of the composition and the decoration and the vitality of the art and the representation in the city of Venice. And staying again in Tuscany, we are in Pisa, is a sketch realized by Le Corbusier. We can see how Le Corbusier, in this case, is not interested in realizing the details, the decoration of the building, but try to understand the composition of the volumes. So in this case, he show us the sequence of the three most important volumes that define the composition of the Piazza dei Miracoli. So in this case, we have the pure volume, circular volume of the baptistry, the strong volume of the church, and the landing volume of the tower. And staying in Tuscany again, this is Siena. In this case, we can see on the right the picture just to show you how is it in the reality, but the painting is totally different in terms of representation. It's not detailed painting, but is a painting that shows us the masses, the volume, the brown, bright color, and the development, the volume development of this amazing and unique piazza in Italy. And changing country, we are in Greece now. Again, another sketch by Le Corbusier. He represented the Acropolis of Athens. And in this case, we can see how is the most interesting, show us the massive volume of the Acropolis, the upper part of the city, and this amazing system of the temples realized with columns that create a rhythm of shadow and light thanks to this the aggregation of the columns. And in this detailed sketch of the columns of the Parthenon, we can understand some of interesting things. First of all, that the temple is a building that face the countryside, face the landscape. So it's not just a simple volume, but is a landscape system. At the same time, we can understand how the column is a very solid blocks carved with these vertical lines that create deep shadow and emphasize the circularity, the circular volume of the column itself. And remaining always in Athens, another picture, another sketch by Louis Kahn, we can see how he shows us the static system, the structural system made of columns and trabeation, beams, horizontal beams, but is something strange because in this case he didn't represent the landscape, but everything is blue, everything is sky. So he shows us through his eyes that the columns, the system of the columns is a system that create a rhythm that frame the light, frame the sky, and the light, the blue system of the sky, become the pavement itself and embrace everything. Even in this sketch by Louis Kahn, we can see how we are in the sunset, so the light is very different, but again we can see the power, the strongness and the massivity of this Doric column that create a unique trilithic system that support these huge and giant beams on top. And talking about the Greek architecture that can create inspiration for the contemporary design, I'd like to show you this project realized by the architect Paolo Zermani that realized this project 20, 30 years ago. And the idea of the column, the piece of the column that create in a juxtaposition the entire column, in this case one piece become a giant element just to host the museum of the Acropolis and the Greek culture. And again, this system of the vertical lines that create a deep shadow in the surface of the column here was used just to realize this rhythm system in the facade of the building that face and compare itself with the rhythmic system of the Parthenon on top of the Acropolis. Changing place again, we can come back to Tuscany in this amazing small church by Giovanni Michelucci and Florentine architect from 20th century, he worked in the countryside. So he decided to use the typology of the colonic house, very typical from the countryside of Tuscany, just to took inspiration for his new project of this small church. So using the same material, the same composition of the volumes, he defined a new language for the churches, not something that can compare with the historical typology. The historical language for the ancient church is not something very contemporary, is not made of steel, of glass, or other new material, but is made of simple material, simple composition of the volumes that create a very domestic aspect that try to talk with the countryside and the original context of the countryside of Tuscany. And moving to Bologna in this building realized by Giuseppe Vaccaro, is another architect of 20th century. In this case, Vaccaro work very close, is attached to an old medieval city gate. So he had to realize a housing complex. So it's a very simple building in terms of function. It's not a monument in this case, not a church, not a museum, but it's just housing. So in this case, he tried to understand the material, first of all, of the city gate. He tried to understand how he can be attached to the city gate. So he worked in two different directions, horizontal and vertical. And starting from the most massive aspect, massive system of the volume of the city gate, he tried to dissolve the materiality of the facade, creating a system open more and more, and arriving at the terrace with an open space and glass facade. But moving to Milan, in this case, after the war in the new reconstruction system, the group BBPR, they have to realize a new skyscraper, a new tower. And if we think about skyscraper, probably we think about glass, we think about this huge vertical system of the volume. They changed totally the paradigm of the skyscraper. They tried to took inspiration from the medieval towers from the Middle Age in Milan, using the same color, the same idea of this volume that is start very narrow and on top increase the volume. So using a totally new materials, concrete and steel especially, they design the new design of this old-fashioned tower. So in this case, you can see how the city tried to bring back the idea of the Middle Age, but changing totally the language and the aspect of the building. And with something very similar, in this case, we are in Portugal, in the city of Oporto. Fernando Távora was called to reconstruct the old medieval city hall. In this case, we are in front of archaeological system, medieval archaeological system. Távora, in this case, realized all the platform to host the archaeological system, and then he reconstruct the old tower of the system. In this case, he used again a modern language, modern materials. In this case, we have a lot of steel, a lot of glass, but he closed three sides of this square tower just to reconstruct the idea of the fortress that used to defend the city from this point, but at the same time he represents a strong modern dialogue with the old cathedral on the side, and changing facade moving into this area, we can see how this closed system shows us the idea of the fortress taking inspiration from the area, from the context. He opened the facade thanks to the new material of the steel and glass, opening the view to the city. And we move to Spain. This is a museum in Merida realized by Rafael Moneo. He realized this museum to protect the Roman ruins. So Moneo tried, in this case, to take inspiration from the Roman architecture, using the system of the arch, using the materiality of the bricks, very typical from the Roman architecture. But in this case, is not replicating the structure of the Roman architecture, but just try to give us the image of the Roman architecture, just to create a link with the spirit, the soul of the place, of the context, and recreate in our mind this strong connection. And we come back to Italy, for example, in this church realized by Giuseppe Vaccaro. He wants to took inspiration from the medieval churches from Venice. So he realized this geometrical pattern, the facade, that remind us the decoration of the medieval churches, but at the same time he used a totally new material, just like concrete and a high technological system, just to create a new space, a new way of living the church inside. And moving to the south of Italy, again in the countryside, close to the sea, he took inspiration from the old system of the house, the small house of the countryside, to replicate some similar shapes just for the new church for the village. So, for example, if you see on the right, the chimney of the house, that was a very important aspect for the life inside of the house. He reused the system just to create the new bell tower of the church. So he used elements of the place just to recreate some new functional system into the modern building. And we can come back to Bologna, again, Italy. In this case, another church, this is the bell tower, that show us the idea of this massive vertical system of the bell tower. In this case, Bologna is very famous for his tower. Nowadays, we have just two towers remaining, but the reconstruction of the Bologna in the Middle Age was something very close to Manhattan, thanks to all the medieval towers that create the skyline of the city center. So Vaccaro used this idea of the tower city just to recreate the new building. So this is only the bell tower, but the church itself is made of a sequence of different volumes that run around an empty space and recreate the idea of the skyline of the city. So again, even the material is important. Bologna is very famous for the bricks. So in this case, Vaccaro used a plan surface made of bricks. But moving to the sea, for example, is a colony for children to spending time in summer. Vaccaro realized this huge horizontal building that tried to face the horizontality of the horizon. So in this case, the building itself is a huge giant building with this portico on the ground floor, just try to embrace the spirit of the soul of this of the horizon itself, and try to create a view connection from the street directly to the beach and the sea. In this case, in this detail, you can see how the horizontality of the building create a strong link connection directly to the sea. And we move to Switzerland now. This amazing thermal bath realized by Peter Zumthor. The idea was to create a space almost carved into the stone. Of course, it's just a built-up building, but in this case, Zumthor just using the same stone of the local stone with this narrow elements of stone embraced all together, and using this spotlight system was able to replicate the idea of staying into a cave. So you can see this look like a very peaceful system, very silent, very rich in terms of light and material. And always Peter Zumthor changing place. We are in the mountain now, very close to a wood system. He used the same material of the woods, so used a local material just to cover this system for a small chapel. So the chapel itself, it looks like a natural element that derives from the ground. And even the shape that reminds us a leaf. So in this case, the natural element create not only the space, the shape of the building, but the material outside. And always Peter Zumthor. Now we are close to a lake. This is a museum, and in this case, Zumthor decided to use this translucent glass just to show us and remind us the transparency of the water that is very close to the museum. And when we are inside again, we have this white ambient system that surrounds us, and we never see what happened outside, but we can feel the light of the sun thanks to this translucent system of the glass that bring natural light inside of the space, changing intensity during the day. And again, Zumthor, another chapel. We are in the countryside close to Cologne in Germany. We are in an open area characterized by the yellow of the landscape and the red system of the ground. In this case, it's the chapel itself. It seems just like a piece of stone just carved from the ground. So changing position, changing point of view, we can discover the system of the chapel. And in this case, approaching to the building, we can discover more and more detail. And when we arrive at the end, we can see this red system made of concrete that remind us the ground of the local area. It seems just carved from the underground. And this idea of creating a piece of stone, it shows us a very strongly, even inside, just like a carved system made of this very articulated and organic system, spatial system inside. We can see the plan, the section in this case, but even inside, it looks like we are moving, we are approaching, we are walking into the earth of the ground and not a built-up system. And we have just one window on top that it seems just like a carving system from the zenith. And the last building I'd like to show you is another church by Giovanni Michelucci here in Florence. We are close to High Speed Street, so we have the idea of the speed itself, just like very speed cars. And this idea create a very organic shape of the building. So it's not a regular geometrical building. We don't have a facade, we don't have a back, but we have just like a volume that is compressed and deformed by the velocity, by the speed of the car that run on the side. So in this case, even the idea of having just like a curtain system that it moves from the wind, from the speed of the car, and the system of the woods and the trees that surround the countryside around the building itself, that inside become just like a stoned system of trees that support the huge system of the inclined curved shape of the roof. And with this, I conclude my lecture. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Muchas gracias, Gianluca. Gracias por traernos, por traer a todo el mundo en lo que es un percurso, un rumbo entre la arquitectura de los países de Europa, sobre todo Italia. Pues empezamos ahora, tenemos le recordamos que puedan enviar sus preguntas o comentarios al panelista, claro, en el apartado de Q&A, que aparece en la barra inferior de Zoom. Le agradezco a Zaira García, que ya envió un par de preguntas. Gianluca, we have a couple of questions from Zaira. The first one, I don't know if Gianluca, you can see the square, because they're very complex questions. The first one is, can the soul of a place exist independently of human perception, or is something that only comes to life through our gaze as designers?
It's a very good question. I'm not sure about the answer, but I'd like to say something. So, if you remember my introduction that Alessandro said, that I work with UNESCO. So UNESCO usually talk about two kind of heritage, tangible and intangible. So the tangible is something that human created. Intangible is the representation, is the culture, etc. So nowadays, even UNESCO, even me, we talk a lot about the unification of the two kind of heritage. Why? Because the intangible is the tangible is created by human, but the human itself express the intangible. So they are very linked and connected. So try to give you an answer to your very interesting question, Zaira. I would say that they can't be exist independently, or at least if we think about the nature, the countryside with not humanized system, probably we can find the soul of that place. But when we talk about the city, when we talk about the anthropological system, what the human created, so this is a very connected with human eyes and human process of design and construction and modifying the system of the countryside and the city itself. So it's important to be able to read the two different aspects. So if you are in a is a nature space, it's important to be able to read, but even to understand what's the aspect. So for example, I show you three different buildings from Zumthor, and most of them was in the countryside. So the countryside was a not so modified system. So he was able to read the original aspect of that place and be able to understood the soul of that place. And he was able even to create a new system that tried to match with the nature system.
Gianluca, we have another very intense question by Zaira, and then we have Ricardo Angel. So in a globalized context where intercultural inspiration is frequent, what ethical responsibility do designers have in representing symbols, tradition, and meaning of other culture in a respectful and authentic way? How can we, as a design professional, avoid superficial or stereotype appropriation, or instead create proposals that demonstrate understanding and awareness of the cultural context for which we are inspired?
A very interesting question. Thank you very much, Zeta, for your question. So, I mean, As designer, even in a globalized context, as you say, it is very important to be very respectful of the place. So, as a professor, as architect, I don't like to bring my print. I'd like always to stop myself, take my time to read, understand, visiting the place where I have to work, and then I try, of course, to give an interpretation. Probably there's not just one way. This is very important. In the design, never exists only one way to do something. There's a lot of ways, infinitive system we can create. Why they are so different? Because we are different as a designer. So I can have my sensibility, I can have my way of interpretation, I have my background. So this is very important. But first of all, I always suggest to stop, take your time, visit the space that where you have to work, and going to the question by Ricardo, read a lot. I can suggest you some books right now, don't worry, but read a lot. Especially in my course in Accademia Italiana, as I told you, is a very different course because it's not just a design course. We talk about culture, we talk about art, we talk about movies, we talk about books, and all the inspiration we can find from culture in general, and how we can bring in the project. This is the most important part, according to me, as designer, even in a globalized context. So your goal is to be able to be respectful when you work, even to understanding the tradition, the culture of different place, different location. This is very important. So if I move to Italy, I don't know how much you know about Italy, but this is very different from north to south. So if you go and working with the south, they have very specific culture, not only in terms of design, architecture, but in terms of culture, state of mind, so different from north. So you have to be able to understand the place, the history of the place, the background, but even the culture of the people, the lifestyle of people, and how people can be able to approach to your work. And
Okay,
answering to
you go
Ricardo,
on. Oh, yeah, you go on it for itself. So what
uh,
do you think about the idea that spaces can affect the way we feel, and how can we use that to our advantage?
So, first of all, I answer to Ricardo. I'd like to suggest you one book. I talk about Peter Zumthor, is a live Swiss architect, very interesting. So I suggest you some of his books. One is called Atmosphere, Place to Be. So you can find in English. It's very interesting because they talk about the spaces, the soul of spaces. So something that I learned when I was a student, I always bring with me. And other some other books by Zumthor probably are more connect to architecture, but of course you can extend your knowledge. One thing I can suggest you, don't read only about design, read about everything. This is a very important suggestion that I learned when I was a student. One of my professors used to say, if you know only about architecture, you don't know nothing about architecture. So this is a very important advice I want to give you. Read about everything. So open your eyes, open your mind, and bring all the influence you can find on the context, on the art of the design, of literature, or poetry into your project. So this is very important. And goes to the last question. What do you, oh no, oh my God, so many questions.
Yeah.
My idea of space can affect the way we feel. Can you, it's this for itself is not, there's not a right answer to your question. Again, it depends on your sensibility and how you can give interpretation of the place, of the spaces. So there's not a unique answer. There's again a lot of series of answer to your question. So sorry if I'm not able to give you the right specific thing you want to know, maybe.
Okay. Can we go on?
Sì?
Yeah. Okay. Andy. Hi, Gianluca. Thank you for your talk. there was a moment where you talk about not focusing on the little detail too much. It was during one of the first painting of a building without windows. How do you decide what details to include in the story without feeling that you're leaving important information behind?
Huh. This is a good question. With experience, no, there's no way to know what you have to do, what not you have to do. So, as a researcher, part of my education was to be able to understand how to synthesize. So, when you have to do something, first of all, I think you have to synthesize. So, if you have to create a synthesis of a book, probably you try to explain only the most important part of the books, not all the dialogues, all the details, etc., etc. Even with a movie. So if I ask you to synthesize a movie in 2 minutes, probably you are not able to explain everything. So the design is the same. The first things to do is try to be able to synthesize. Probably it's not so simple, it's not so easy. Probably you will need more time and a lot of experience, but at the end you will be able to understand. But again, there's not only one way. Probably what I see and what I synthesize and what's important for me probably will not be the same for you. So different eyes, different kind of approach, different kind of synthesis and information, and what we probably what is important for me is not for you, and vice versa. We find the same important thing. So again, it's a personal, it's a process. Design, I think, is a personal process in terms of a synthesis, in terms of approach, and then of course you can improve, you can work in team, etc., etc.
Good. We have Ximena. Ximena, do you have favorite piece of art of architecture that you always return to for inspiration?
A lot, a lot. Maybe it's not only in Florence, so maybe it's not so easy to come back and find inspiration. For example, I really love here in Florence the Church of San Miniato al Monte. Is a medieval church here in Florence, a very peaceful place that I like to go there sometimes. There were not a lot of people, so I can stand, I can focus on some details, I can think about, I can sketch, I can take pictures. So, and then maybe I like to come back to Rome. For me, is an amazing experience. I always come back to Rome. I went in Rome 3 times in the last months for work, of course, but even for my spare time, spending time there, come back to other architecture. So a lot. Probably, I think Peter Zumthor architecture is one of my most alive architects at the moment, where I always love to come back, maybe to find a lot of inspiration. Yes.
Okay, and then we have Daniela. What advice would you give to a student of architecture who's just starting out?
Read, read a lot and travel a lot. I think the most important things you can do as a student is reading, traveling, and drawing. There are three advice I'd like to give you, because reading, you can open your mind. Traveling, you can have a direct experience of the place, of the architecture, of the design. I think not only view picture, but living with your and see with your eyes. And then drawings. There's one of my professor at the first year of architecture said you should draw at least one drawings every day. So you can understand how to bring your idea into your hand.
Thank you, Gianluca. Last question from an anonymous. In contemporary design, how do we balance honoring a place past with responding to its present needs?
Very hard questions, guys. So it's not one way to answer. To be honest, well, you need to create. You need to experiment and try to be respectful. Sometimes it works, sometimes not. And I mean, there's no way to copy the past, so you don't have to be afraid of working the present. This is very important. I don't like when people are afraid of working in the present, but we living our contemporary. So we live in the contemporaneity. We have to be contemporaneity, but of course we have to try at least to read the past, understanding the past, and be able to create a new piece of the context. So it's just like a puzzle. Will be okay. This is a good example. Imagine you have a book with the blank papers at the end, and you have to add a new chapter. So first of all, you need to read the previous part, the previous chapters, and then you can be able to add a new one. So design architecture is the same. So you need to read what happened before, so you will be able to add a new chapter. And maybe someone else will arrive after you and will add a new chapter again and again and again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Gianluca. Thank you very much. Really, really well. Thanks to all the students and all the future designers that took part of this webinar, which is part of the 5th edition of Encuentro Creativo, which is a project by the Italian Chamber, supported by the Embassy of Italy in Mexico. And as Accademia Italiana, we're very happy to be part of this event. The goal of Encuentro Creativo is to promote Italian academic opportunity in Mexico, connecting students and professionals with Italian educational institution and training programs. So you just met an Italian architect and professor of Accademia Italiana. Accademia Italiana has been founded in 1984 and is one of the Europe's most renowned institute in design and applied arts. A very forward-looking vision, as we said. It has established itself as a leading institution in artistic, professional, and linguistic education. Its academic program stands out from combining historical tradition with the rapid evolution of new technologies, integrating both past and future in its educational approach. But I think Gianluca's talk and conference was clearly showing what we think and what we do in every day in Accademia Italiana. So we welcome you, and we look forward to see you all in Florence or Rome. We hope this has been valuable in bringing Mexican students and general public closer to new concept and new perspective. So on behalf of the Italian Commerce, the Chambers of Commerce in Mexico, I would like to express my gratitude for your presence today. And I would like to extend my thanks to all the brands supporting Encuentro Creativo, including Essilo, Luxottica, Lavazza, and Fiat, among the others. Again, thanks so much to Gianluca. It's been a pleasure to have you here. Thanks so much as well to every participant, the one who make the very interesting questions that challenge Gianluca. But they were super intense and deep, which means that from the other side of this screen, we have a very attentive and future designers, and we would like to keep expanding the relationship between Italy and Mexico. So have a good day, que tengas un buen día todo el mundo. Muchas gracias a Gianluca otra vez y a todo el equipo de Encuentro Creativo. Que tengáis un buen día y una buena vida como diseñadores y arquitectos.